we are aware that our time here is temporary. And as a consequence of being aware of that, can we start to have a softer, kinder relationship with ourselves and with the people around us?
Hi, my name's Andy, and welcome to Headspace. No, not really. Actually, if you use the app, you're probably not used to seeing me because they keep me locked in a very dark studio. After 7 years, they let me out. And the more I thought about how I wanted to spend my time, the more I thought about how nice it would be to maybe go on a bit of a journey together. The techniques of meditation are just one small part of how to live a healthier and happier life. I feel I can share it in a very different way out here than I can when I'm sitting in the studio. And that's it, really. So, shall we go?
So I wonder how much you notice kind of change in your life. Change is a massive part of the practice of mindfulness, definitely a big part of the practice of meditation as well. And as I think about my own life, I can't help but think not only about the amount of change over the years, not only in my own life, but in the world around me, but also kind of the impact that change has had on my life. And I don't necessarily mean the things that have happened, more about kind of noticing change. And today, welcome to India, by the way. Today we're in Rajasthan, and we're at this incredible old fort. And this fort was built, I think, just over 500 years ago. And although that sounds like a long time ago, it's not really that long ago. And I think we have an idea, when we see these grand sort of buildings and palaces and forts, there's a sense that they're going to exist forever. It's just the nature of them. They feel very, very solid. And when we came up here and when we had a look and we saw just how sort of run down it had become, this was once the center of not a thriving sort of town, but, there were a lot of people here. I would imagine it was quite spectacular in its time. People disappeared. Place ran down and the building's starting to fall apart. And my guess is, unless something significant happens, it's probably eventually going to crumble. And I've seen that a lot around here in recent days, just these incredible old structures that are now just piles of rubble. The reason I became a monk, there's lots of different reasons. But when I really think about what motivated me to take that bigger a leap in my life, it was a couple of different things that happened in my late teens. Losing my stepsister when she was out cycling on the road, a van driver fell asleep and ran her over. And then being with a group of friends when a drunk driver kind of crashed into us. So I was lucky I didn't get hit. But several people died, a lot of people injured. And it's really difficult, I think, to try to make sense of that. Like, the mind doesn't really know how to make sense. How do you make sense of something like that? But the one thing it did do, it left me with a feeling that life was not going to go on forever. Like, you could think of it as a really early midlife crisis or a wake-up call, but there was an overwhelming sense that we think about as change being inevitable, or a need to try or just an awareness of the limited amount of time we all have. Again, we think that we're going to live forever until we actually see it right in front of us, till we actually hear it right in front of us. And then I think it really starts to feel very different. So when I think back, experiencing that change in such a direct way, as painful as it was, not just for me, for everybody that was there or involved in it or impacted it in some way. But feeling that so directly, I really think, when I look back, that was such a big part of why I decided to leave my life behind and go and become a monk. When I began in the monastery, I assumed that I would begin by sitting down and closing my eyes and focusing on my breath and all the things you usually associate with meditation. But actually, when I went into my first retreat, I was told that forget how long it was now. I think it was for of a year retreat. I think the first 6 weeks or the first 8 weeks was focused solely on these types of reflections. So the idea of how we have a greater appreciation in our life, how impermanence and change plays a part in our life, how cause and effect, how karma plays out in our life, and how there is just an inevitable amount of suffering in this shared human condition. And we've spent time reflecting on each of them. And for me, the one on impermanence, as I say, they all left their own sort of mark, and they were all equally important in their own way. But there was something about impermanence. I just think we have this tendency to hold on. In fact, if you think about why we struggle in life, so three main things. So either first one, we're not aware of what's going on. Even though it's our own mind, even though the thoughts are appearing in our own mind, even though the feelings we're experiencing in our own body and mind, we are not always aware of what we are thinking and what we are feeling. So if we're not aware, then there's nothing we can do. We have no choice, no opportunity to change or intervene or even to accept things as they are. The other is attachment. So our tendency is to chase after the things that we like, to hold on to the things that we want. And because of that, we create tension. There's hope that we can hold on to it, and there's fear that we might not be able to hold on to it. Then the third one is resistance or aversion. So we tend to push against the things that we don't like. And the more we push against them, the more tension we create. We push against them because we fear them in some way. We don't want them, we don't like them, we don't like the way they make us feel. And because of those three things, most of the time we're just caught up in the world of thought. We're just experiencing what feels like the same thing over and over and over again. That's just an habitual tendency. It's not the only way it can be. It can be different than that, but it can only be different once we become more aware. If we become more aware, then we can start to see what are the things that we're trying to hold on to. Once we become aware, we can see what are the things that we're trying to resist in our life. And with that awareness of those things, we can start to notice the change. We can start to notice how these things come and go, how we can't hold on to anything in life. We might think we can, but that's kind of out of our control. Equally, we can't forever resist something. And it's interesting because we know at some level, we have all chased after things that we have not been able to get, achieve, or hold on to. We've all experienced things that we've tried to suppress or to push away in our life. And yet eventually they've come up in other ways in our life. So we know that it's true, but for some reason, we would rather live with the idea. And it really kind of comes to this idea of wanting to live with a greater sense of certainty, wanting to live with a greater sense of security. So the mind, the ego, our identity, we like the idea, even when life is difficult, even when life is painful, we like the idea that we know who we are. We like to know where we are in life. So that sense of certainty brings a certain amount of comfort, even when life is uncomfortable. It's a strange sort of paradox, but we do it sort of all the time. So if we can somehow let go of that need for certainty, that need for security, then all of a sudden, we're actually a lot more aware of change because we're okay. We're just resting in uncertainty. If you're ever unsure, if you're ever looking for a definition of meditation, there are many. But I think learning to rest in uncertainty is actually a really good way of thinking about it, where we sit not really knowing, not having the answers, just interested, curious in the passing phenomena of the mind. Again, it may sound insignificant, but the more we see it, the more we feel it, the more it becomes part of who we are in our day-to-day life. It's so different from thinking about it. You could listen to this 100 times. You won't, I know, but you could, and it would still not make a difference. It wouldn't make a difference in that way. It's only through our direct experience of change that it starts to make a difference in our life. There are books that can inspire us. There are talks that can motivate us. But it's only when we choose to realize when we're caught up in these things, when we're too attached, when we're determined to find a place of certainty and security in our life, that we can actually let go of that and start to experience change in all of its different ways. Of all the teachings, actually, of all the things I think that I focused on when I was training as a monk, was training in meditation, I would say impermanence and change is arguably like the most important. I think it's the thing that it transformed my meditation practice. Because I don't know about you, I used to go into meditation looking for a very particular experience. And that assumes that something is always the same. But if we know that everything is changing all of the time, then it's pointless going in looking for a particular experience. So all of a sudden, I started to reframe that in terms of, okay, well, I'm just turning up to see what the weather's like today, the weather just being an analogy for the mind. If I think about how it's impacted me in my life, I think it's in my everyday life. I think it's definitely allowed me to live with a greater sense of freedom. When difficult things have happened, I've not got quite so hung up on them. When really difficult things have happened, I've not been quite so overwhelmed by them. And when good things have happened, it's encouraged me to really enjoy them while they're happening, knowing that that's going to change as well. And that may sound like a very pessimistic way of thinking about life, but actually just encourage it. It doesn't speed up anything. It doesn't change anything. It just allows us to savor that which we enjoy, that which we like, and it allows us to accept, to be at ease with that which is difficult and that which we don't like. So however you choose to build impermanence into your life, I'd really encourage you to find those moments of change. It's really different thinking about it than actually seeing it and acknowledging it. And we can only acknowledge it if we're present in the moment. There's no other way of doing it. So the more we practice being present, the more we practice letting go of thoughts and coming back to this moment now, whatever we're doing in this moment, the more ability, the more space we'll have to notice change. And over time, that change and that awareness of change is what's going to give us a greater freedom.